Hello.
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 Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jacob. Hi, Norm.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm
Hello, everybody. Okay.
Hello.
Arya, what page are we on?
126. Air travel.
Yep.
Okay. Right. Okay, so we saw that there's a major machlokas between the Ashkenazim and the Sfardim. The Sfardim make Birchas HaGomel even for different cities, travel on water. The Ashkenazim, not so. And we'll review some of that tonight. With respect to Birchas HaGomel, the advent of commercial air travel may be the most dramatic change between the world of the Gemara and the Rishonim and that of today. The poskim of recent generations have discussed under what circumstances a person would recite a gomel after flying. Is this treated similarly to regular travel on the roads? Or is it considered more dangerous? Does the halacha differ if one flies over a desert or an ocean? So there are three basic rulings. Rav Ovadia Yosef in Yechavet Das rules that an air passenger should recite a gomel. Since the precarious nature of air travel parallels that of a sea journey, one should recite the bracha. Rav Moshe Feinstein takes a similar approach, arguing that flying is similar to traversing the sea, since in both, only the ship or the airplane protects one from the surrounding environment. If God forbid the vessel would malfunction, one's life would be in danger. And we read this Igris Moshe last week. We learned this. This talked about the fact that if you took away the plane, you would fall out of the plane. It's even worse.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
No, so we learned that. It's good to get back into this. We did not learn the Tzitz Eliezer. That's what we're going to start with.
Right.
The Tzitz Eliezer, the Tzitz Eliezer was Rav Eliezer Waldenberg, posek who lived in Bnei Brak. passed away maybe 20 years ago, so it was a contemporary posek. Had 18 or 19 volumes. He was a primary posek in medical halacha. He was the posek of Sharet Tzedek. The Rav Asher Weiss took over from him regarding that, but Rav Yezer Waldbrumer had a lot of very important medical tshuvas, as well as many other psakim. The Tzitz Eliezer writes that air travel constitutes legitimate grounds to recite the bracha, especially when crossing oceans or deserts. He qualifies his ruling by concluding that for a relatively short flight within a single country, the danger is not as great and one does not recite a gomel. Think about traveling from LA to San Francisco. Probably LA to New York, it would be different because that's not a short flight. He says, Lafianias daiti, in my humble opinion, Nirabor Shabami Derech Rechoka Betisa Baviron, somebody who's traveling a long distance, he doesn't qualify what that distance is. He just says Derech Rechoka. Yesh levarch berachas hagomel b'shem u'malchus. Ki hu bichlal avrei derech yam v'gam bichlal holchim midbarios. I guess he assumes if you're going on a long flight, you're traveling over an ocean, you're traveling over a desert. V'tarvayu isnu bei. I mean, when you travel to California, you certainly travel over Death Valley and other desert areas in the Southwest. So that's desert. And then certainly if you're flying, let's say from Europe to California, you're flying, do you need your safer?
Do you have one?
No, I don't have this, I don't have multiples in 15. Okay.
Yeah, but Ernie, I just looked up some facts here from the National Safety Council. So a car is the most dangerous, with airline being the least dangerous. I can read off the numbers here, but over the last 10 years, passenger vehicle death rate per 100 million passenger miles was over 20 times higher than for buses, 17 times higher than for passenger trains, and 595 times higher than for scheduled airlines. So there's no comparison. What's more dangerous?
Yeah, but not, remember, the Gemara mentioned traveling through a desert and traveling through an ocean.
Yeah.
Not every car, so you're talking about risk. But here we're also working within the context of what Chazal meant by a sakana. I think we just, and you raise a very good point. It's not necessarily, we had a shita based on risk by the Tfilas HaDerech, but some of this relates to the four people that have to give thanks. Arbet Tzricha Lahodos. Yordei Hayam, Holchim Midbarios, right? Somebody was healed from an illness, somebody came out of prison. So that's why the Tzitz Eliezer is saying that when you fly over an ocean and then over a desert, well, you meet two of the criteria. That's why he says, V'tarvayu isnu bei. The Herald is quoting us current modern statistics. It may be true, but there were other types of risk in a desert. Bandits, and we don't have that anymore. Wild animals,
The bandits are at CVS.
No, we
or
watched-
Nordstrom.
we watched- Shall we watch how they went across the West to America?
Yeah,
And we watched-
Susie is reminding,
we watched-
we watched Yellowstone, which documented the pioneers who traveled east through the Indian territory, coming west through desert, through Indians, and most of them, many of them did not make it for all of those reasons. They also had to go through water. I mean, there were people who drowned there. Okay, so that's like the way the poskim were dealing with in the 1800s. That's the situation they were in. but we're now dealing with a more modern context, right? But let's see what the tzitz says. Sharei aviram b'derech tisa sotas gam me'al gabi hayam v'gabi bibarios. So he says a plane flies over the ocean, over the desert. Vizil bezegam basar taima. He says, let's use logic. For osa sakona sheyesh balicha b'sfina v'mibarios. The same danger that existed when you're traveling on a boat or in a desert, yeshna gam b'tisa b'aviron, exists when you're flying a plane. V'ulai od yoter mizeh, maybe worse. V'matzinu b'sefer ha'aruch. In the Sefer ha'aruch, Erech Arba, which is a Rishon, in a certain volume, Erech Arba, Shemevi B'Shem Rav Hai Gaon, in the name of one of the Gaonim from the year 900, Sheheshiv Desakonis Yardi Ayam, Yoter Gdola Mashar. He mentioned that seafarers traveling in the ocean was the biggest risk. Midnei de Bechad Riga Oivdin. In 1 second, you're dead. The boat sinks, and that's it. Haremi Kolsha came Betisa Baviron. So the Tzitz Eliezer, regardless of Herald statistics, when you fly in a plane, you can also lose your life in 1 second. The engines fail, there's a catastrophic failure. Yes, it may not be statistically common, but it can happen. You're in your house and your TV has a short circuit. Okay, it breaks, but it's not a life-threatening problem. When you fly in a plane, it may not be statistically common, but if there's some mishap that occurs, it's potentially life-threatening. So you see, there's a certain element put here like that, by the way, Harold, when you mentioned those statistics, is that mortality statistics or does it include injury? Because if you include injury,
deaths.
Deaths.
Yeah.
Okay. No, because many people are in car accidents that suffer injuries, much more than death. But it's also a death issue. Okay.
Huh.
I mean, we don't necessarily think, a lot of people have been in car accidents and they don't die.
They're talking about statistics. They're talking about if something happened in that mode of transportation.
The risk is greater. Saul says they're not looking at the statistics. They're looking at that if something happens during that mode of transportation, it's in 1 second you can be dead. It's a boat and a plane. That's why he's comparing the two. He thinks air travel is even more riskier than ship travel. Very interesting. Well, but the Tzitz Eliezer was living at a time where there were a lot more plane crashes. There were 60s, 70s, 80s. We don't see it anymore, but it was more prevalent. The defect of one of the screws of a plane, from the thousands of screws that are there, as much as the pilot is smart, they're going to crash. Nothing they can do can save it.
And you saw that that was the problem with the 737, basically, that blew out because the screws were not put in properly.
It was very scary. If you saw the Wall Street Journal this morning, there was a Dreamliner. There was a 787 Dreamliner that had a technical failure, the sudden drop in the plane. 50 people on the plane were injured. Some that had to be hospitalized. No one died. That's very unusual for the Dreamliner, but they published it today. I don't know what happened to Boeing stock, but it's worrisome. Anyways, because as Walter said, they've had other problems with other planes. But let's say you're flying from LA to Chicago in the same country. Here he gives a geder. If the flight is an hour or two, pachot o yoter. So the tzitz would say flying from LA to New York, you would say a birchas hagomer. Near the ein levarach bechagon do hagon. Like if it's a short flight, you don't need hagomer. There is man katzar kazeh, such a short flight. Not so much risk. Ki im li'itim rechokot mod, very low statistics. V'chili didi, and he gets support with divrei Knesset Agdola. Hagos Beis Yosef. This was also one of the Meforshim of the Shulchan Aruch. Shekoseh b'dom lezeh b'nogeh liyam. It was even written regarding ocean travel. If you're going from St. Louis to Vicksburg on the Mississippi River, or you're going to a village, so we have two approaches. Rav Moshe said that flying is similar to traversing the sea. We didn't hear Rav Moshe making any kind of get there. He basically said that if you fly by plane, you should make a birchas hagomer. The Tzitz Eliezer was the first who came up with this thing that if you travel over ocean, over desert, that's certainly a reason to say it. But it also seems that if you take a long flight within a country, let's say from LA to New York, you would also say it. A third approach is taken by others. Let's just see the footnote. 9. It's unclear, I've been mentioning it, how Rav Waldenberg would rule when flying from New York to LA. Such a flight takes place completely within one country, but the flight time is more than 5 hours long, which is much longer than the 1 to 2 hours mentioned by Rav Waldenberg. In addition, it's worth noting that today most experts agree that the most dangerous times during a flight are a takeoff and landing. If so, there should not be a significant difference between the domestic and international flights in this regard. But I don't think that Tzurba people are taking into account what he said, that when you fly over a desert is an issue. And from LA to New York, you fly over a desert. The whole Southwest is a desert. So it's part of like whole Chemot Barrios, no different. So there's a third approach, who rule that Agomel is determined by what Harold brought, by safety statistics. And with the abundance of safety measures and protocols in place, they view air travel very differently than Rav Moshe and the Tzitz Eliezer. See the Pnine Halacha, that's Rav Eliezer Melamed, who explains that the determination of whether to recite Agomel depends upon safety statistics. Accordingly, and therefore also has nothing to do with if you flew over desert or ocean, doesn't make a difference if the statistics say that it's safe. Accordingly, Rav Chaim Jachter relates that Rav Aaron Lichtenstein reported that his father-in-law, Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, held that one does not recite Agomel after air travel unless one feels that flying is dangerous. Rav Soloveitchik himself flew back and forth from his home to Boston to New York City to teach in Yeshiva University every week and did not recite Agomel, as he did not feel that it was dangerous. However, the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah offer a compromise between the Ramban and the Meiri. They cite the opinion of the French Rabbanim that say that one should recite Agomel only when one has traveled on a dangerous road. Hence, the custom of French Jews was not to bless Agomel after intercity travel, because they did not consider travel on the roads of France to be dangerous. The French Rabbanim interpret the quote from the Gemara Yerushalmi to be referring to Tfilas Haderech, where one is required to say this tefillah regardless of the degree of danger in the journey, just based on distance. Remember, 72 minutes. However, this opinion disagrees with the opinion quoted by the Meiri, in that if one has traveled on a dangerous road, he must recite Agomel whether a serious incident has occurred or not. And the Shulchan Aruch cites this view as the practice of German and French Jews. Accordingly, it is the practice of Ashkenazic Jews to recite Agomel only after traveling on a dangerous road. Hence, the question posed to us as to whether one should recite Agomel after airplane travel is contingent upon whether one considers airplane travel to be dangerous. Rav Lichtenstein has informed me that it is Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik's Zatzal's practice not to recite Birchas Agomel after airplane travel, unless a serious incident had occurred. Nevertheless, Rav Lichtenstein recalls the Rav saying that if an individual perceives airplane travel to be dangerous, he should recite Agomel. The Piskei Tshuva notes that the prevalent custom is to recite Agomel when traveling internationally, which is the approach of the Tzitz Eliezer. He comments that other authorities favor reciting the bracha without shame and malchus. Leinin Birchas Agomel b'Nesiya Baviron, Hinei, Mineg Ha'olam levarach Agomel b'Shem Malchus, kishnosin Adil Adina ba'ofen she'ovrim me'al yamim midbarius. If you travel from country to country and you cross oceans or deserts, then you make a bracha with the Shem Malchus. Aval pi she'ein b'Nesiya Baviron, Osan sakanot shedibu Chazal, alover b'yam v'mar. Even though there isn't the danger, the way Chazal talked about at their time about crossing an ocean and a desert. The incident of danger is low. It says it's more common to have an injury, like Harold said, traveling in a car. He says, "Mikol makom, yesh liyashav minhag ha'olam levarach b'kamas simuchim niyotim al pi harishonim v'poskim." So then, why is the dominant practice to recite the bracha? Because the many Rishonim poskim said you should. Mikol makom, it's l'kama migdolei ador matzanu shayimorim l'sholem levarach lo shem malchus. There were many gdolim who told people who asked them to say the Birchas Agomel without Shem and Malchus. Unless there was an incident on the plane that was dangerous. And then we have a nice chart for the halacha.
Ernie, have you ever heard anybody say Birkas Agomel without Shem or Malchus?
I have not heard that. We say,
Nor have I. But I mean, it seems that it's prevalent.
we do say the Baruch Shepatrani without Shem and Malchus.
I understand, but Birkas Agomel, I never heard anybody say if he got up to say Birkas Agomel, he says with Shem and Malchus.
But you see, because there are these poskim who today don't consider the air travel to be significant. So you have the opinion of the tzitz, but those that are not relying on the tzitz say the bracha, but don't say it with Shem and Malchus. Okay. What about imprisonment? Unfortunately, it's a reality, even in our time. The Gemara's original formulation of the equivalent of the requirement to recite Birchas Agomel mentions someone who was incarcerated in prison and released. In recent centuries, the nature of imprisonment has changed starkly from what it was in the times of the Gemara and the Rishon. A prisoner no longer faces the same mortal danger that was once prevalent. I don't know if that's true.
And which country?
Huh?
Exactly, it depends which country. That's a good ayora. Depends which country you're in.
Okay. Understanding that not all imprisonments are the same, the Mogen Avram clarifies that Birchas Agomel is warranted when a person is imprisoned for capital offenses. That means where his it's like a death penalty case, right? Chavush al isken nefashos, on some kind of capital crime. And the Bir Halacha, of course, the Mishnah Brura explains what the Mogen Avram meant. Nira midvarav, b'zed gam chavush ena mechuyev lahodos. Ela machmas shehu b'sakona machmas chibusho. Why is the prisoner here making Birchas HaGomel? Because his life was in danger. Lachi b'chavish machmas mamon, shetovim mamonish v'vadei al kol panim lo yavad over the sakanas nefashos. He says somebody who's in prison because of money issues, that's not going to come to a danger in his life. Sha'afilu im lo yosig yodel l'shalem, even if he can't pay off his debt, gamkein lo yarguoso. He's not going to be put to death. Lefichach ein mevarchin. But if there's a claim for some kind of capital crime, and then he gets off, if the verdict comes out that he's going to be executed and he gets saved before the verdict or whatever, then of course he would have to make a birchas hagomel. That's how the Biur Halacha explains. So right now, we would say that people who are put into prison for money reasons, I would say that's 98% of why people are in prison these days. I know, but even if you owe money to the IRS, to the federal government, they're not going to put you to death. Yeah, but why would you be put into jail for that? I'm saying you're normally going to be, most of the cases we know today of white collar crime, white people, I mean, it's not that common that we know of. I mean, I know of a case where somebody, there was a letter bomb sent, right, and somebody was killed, that person was put into prison. But again, he was not going to be executed.
Mhm.
Okay. So, l'chora, according to all of these things, when you got out of such prison, you would not say a birchas hagomel.
The risk in many of these cases is actually from fellow prisoners who commit crimes, which isn't mentioned here.
You notice, I was thinking the same thing, Yaakov, but the Biur Halacha is the Mishnah Berurah. He died in 1933. So, he didn't know our prison system and what's going on now. So the threat from the other prisoners, we'll see whether anybody comments. The Biur Halacha cites several other poskim who reject the Magen Avram's distinction. It was the Magen Avram who said Aliskin Nefashos. And the other poskim treat all incarcerations uniformly. Nonetheless, he writes that Ashkenazic practice is to be concerned for the ruling of Magen Avram, and therefore not to say it, certainly b'shem malchus, if it's only for money. The reason is, as we learned above, many Ashkenazic poskim hold that one recites the bracha only when one is in a situation of actual danger. Vinei hayal yahu rabo, birkes Yosef. They argue with the Magen Avram. That even if someone was in prison for money, they would also make a birchas hagomel. He was in prison. He was not in charge of his own life. Even though we have their words, lidchos divrei Magen Avram, eino ela min svara. He says only Sephardic practice would follow the more lenient opinion that you say the bracha by money issues. Ulefi stimas hamachaber, mash'en gel das Ramah, uleminig Ashkenaz, ulemisha noig kein bevadai tzidko divrei Magen Avram, dem lokem shein tzakone mevorchim umach b'slam b'mashein shot b'nafsho. The Biur Halacha ends up saying that we would not say the bracha if it was only imprisonment for money reasons. Sephardic poskim write that the loss of freedom is quite consequential, and all incarcerations today are subject to birchas hagomel. In addition, the Piskei Teshuvos also recognize, like what Yaakov said tonight, the precarious nature of prisons more generally, the reality that a prison may be considered a place of grave danger, without respect to the official terms of his imprisonment. If he's in the company of violent inmates, and you get out, hagomel would always be warranted. I would think that that's the general psak today. These are rapists and murderers. There's danger from the other prisoners. Okay. 132. Recovery from illness. According to the statement in the Gemara cited above, those who must give thanks include one who was ill and recovered. although we have thus far spoken about gomel relating to mortal danger. The Rashba writes that a person who has recovered from any confining illness, not merely a potential fatal illness, must recite a gomel. Sha'alta, the Rashba is responding to a question put to him. How sick must you be so that when you get healed, you need to make the bracha, tshuva. If you were bedridden, when you can get out of bed, then you should make the bracha. Whoever goes to bed, it's like you went to the gallows. We don't think of it that way, but that's how the Rashba thought of it. Lidon, Sharmilo, have a Ravi Potter. As if we go up to the gallows and we're asked, show us evidence that you're innocent and we won't execute you. The same thing. When you fall ill and you're in bed, you have to view yourself the same way. Even if somebody, well, based on the Rashba, if you were sick with corona that made you lie in bed for 2 or 3 days, I'm not talking being hospitalized. Just you had a flu, muscle aches, you would have made a birchas gomel when you got better. That's Lefidus Rashba. And he had many miracles. Even if this has happened many times, you still have to give a birchas gomel. In the Rashba's view, when someone suffers from a debilitating ailment, not life-threatening, this person should be treated as permanently ill. Accordingly, it's only by deliberate change, which is an act of Hashem's compassion, that the person recovers. And the individual is required to acknowledge this by reciting Birchas HaGomel. The Ravid opposes this. It is brought by the Tur, insists that a Gomel is sanctioned only if one has fallen so ill that his life is in danger. Because of our Ravid, Dafka b'makar shel chalal, an internal injury, sheyes bo sakona. The Shulchan Aruch rules in accordance with the Rashba, but the Ramah sides with the Ravid. So the Mechaber says you have to make a bracha for any illness. Even if it's not chas sakona some foshos. Below makar shel chalal, not an internal injury. You went into bed and you got out of bed. Like somebody who was going to be executed. Actually, the Gardom, they used to make these risers, sort of steps that the Dayanim would sit on and adjudicate you. Whether this is something all the time, whether ubam izman, something that comes periodically, or it's not even kavua. The Ramah says yesh shoymrim, the einu mavach rak al choyle sheyesh b'sakana, kikon makar shel chalal, like an internal injury. V'chein nohagim ba'Ashkenaz, and this is how the Ashkenazim rule. The Ramah borrowed the term from the Ravid. We have translated the term chalal, which sometimes indicates hollow or cavity as internal, but there's an implication of chilul as in the violation of Shabbos. Because you're allowed to violate Shabbos, chilul Shabbos, for a sakana nefashos. The Ramaz understood his ruling that the criteria for Birchas HaGomel corresponds to those illnesses that are dire enough to justify violating Shabbos, because there's this play on words halal. However, there are many medical circumstances in which a person may be in a precarious state that might not involve the kind of urgent danger that's involved in violating Shabbos. Some of these circumstances, including undergoing procedures which entail anesthesia, uvechlal makar shel chalal, kol minei nituchim pnimiim, internal surgeries, afilu pshutim biyoter, ach b'zmanenu yesh lidomim nasim bar domim mekomit. I think he wants to say that local anesthesia would not be something that would make you that sick. V'chein hatkafat lev, heart attacks, uklayot, kidney failure, mara, polycystitis, like jaundice, or COVID, which is jaundice, vireot, or lung inflammation, pneumonia, v'chadome. Shalafi divrei arofa metapelai b'matzav shel sakana. The doctor says this is a sakana. Afilu alula machla lachzor al atzma, or the illness can come back. Vafilu lo yav matzav shel sakana, even if it's not danger to your life. Api divrei arofim. Ach nechlash kol kach me'amachla, but he's so weak. Ad shelo yah b'kol kol tov l'ret mitato. He's so weak he can't get out of bed. Lemeshach shlosh yamim v'yoter, 3 days or more. So the Piskei Tshuva is giving a real gather here. Not that many people are sick for 3 days that they have to stay in bed for 3 days. That's pretty sick. Certainly, if you had to be admitted to a hospital. Certainly, you should stay at Birchas HaGomel when you're released from the hospital or you get out of bed after 3 days. A virus, a flu, certain infections, like a lung infection, kidney infection, urinary tract infection, even with fever. And he had to go to bed because of weakness. Even though he's not sakana nefashos, at least the Roifim said he wasn't. He's so weak he can't get out of bed for 3 days. But if he was not weakened so much, where he could get out of bed after 1 or 2 days, so Einam of Archa Gomel al pi minig Ashkenaz, but al pi Shulchan Aruch pi minig Sfard you would say unless a mild headache, where he didn't go to bed at all. So the answer is it's a machlokas Sfardim and Ashkenazim. The Sfardim are much more lenient to say Birchas HaGomel, which they've been all throughout this whole sheet last few weeks. But all these things, that the Ashkenazim are much more restrictive in when you say Tfilas Haderech and when you say Birchas HaGomel than the Sfardim. The Piskei Tshuva maintains that many internal illnesses do not qualify as dangerous by today's standards, and one would not recite a Gomel after recovering from them, despite the Ramo's ruling. He does accede, though, that even Ashkenazim who are confined to bed for 3 days recite a Gomel. According to the Sephardic poskim, who hold that even somebody who was not perilously ill must also recite the bracha, the opinions are divided regarding someone who was not bedridden for 3 days. The Ben Ish Chai and Rav Mordechai are right that a person would not recite a Gomel if his life was never in danger and he wasn't bedridden for 3 days. Maimer Mordechai, which is Mordechai Liao, if you had a life-threatening illness, you do say the Birchas HaGomel. But in line with the language of the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Ovadia Yosef rules that even after lighter illness, where a person is not bedridden for 3 days, you recite Birchas HaGomel. Deus Marana Shulchan Aruch Nireh, he says the opinion of Rav Yosef Karo is, if you went into bed even for 1 day, and then you got up, you say HaGomel. You don't have to be sick for 3 days. Ayin b'Bach u'b'Prima Godim Sham. These are the Bach was the super commentary on the tour. The Prima Godim is a super commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. V'chein kazav b'Bir Halacha Sham. The Bir Halacha, the Mishnah Berurah, explains the sheet of the Shulchan Aruch that way. Elash from Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai was in Baghdad in like late 1800s. Kosav, a major Sephardi posek. I would say prior to Ovadia Yosef, he was the primary Sephardi posik that people followed. She'ein levarach hagomel el ba'ofen sha'al lamata lemita v'hayachol legimel yomim. He's more stringent. You have to be sick for 3 days. El she'ein tzarich lezeh gimel yomim shleimim. You don't need 3 full days. Uchanir chashash l'svor sataz shekosov came b'das Ramah. He was concerned about the opinion of the Taz, commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, and the Ramah, the Das Chaye Adam, Rav Danziger, early 1700s. He was like the first, the Chaye Adam was the first halachic compendium, even before the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, or probably about the same time, before the Aruch HaShulchan, and of course before the Mishnah Berurah. So they were concerned that maybe unless you were sick enough for 3 days, it would be a brach levatala. That's why they were stringent like this. Avaladivri Maran, according to Rav Avadia Yosef, ein lochush bazel safik berachas lakel. Rav Avadia didn't think that it was a problem with a brach levatala. It is worth noting that the discussion surrounding it being bedridden applies specifically to general illnesses on weakness, but not to localized injury. Thus, if a person is unable to function normally due to a broken arm or leg, and he's constantly resting in bed, that does not constitute being bedridden. So it's got to be a general systemic illness that puts you into bed. If you've got to keep your leg up, but you're not generally sick, that's not considered making you bedridden. Now, let's talk a little bit of how the Birchas HaGomel is done, like the way Chaim conducts Birchas HaGomel in Shul. Let's see if we're doing it correctly. Birchas HaGomel is unlike most other brachot, whose recitations may be completely personal and private, and whose terms are primarily dictated by the mitzvah the person is doing, the food being eaten, or the event currently experienced or witnessed. However, as noted above, Birchas HaGomel is not merely a personal expression of thanks, but indeed a publicization of the person's gratitude. As the verse states, they shall give thanks to the Lord for his kindness and acknowledge his wonders to the children of men. That was the pasuk in Tehillim. So, in accordance with this categorization, Birchas HaGomel is fundamentally a public recitation. The Gemara Masech the Bracha cited in source 2 states that the bracha must be recited in the company of 10 men, or let's say in the company of 10. And the Gemara also discusses whether some or all of these 10 must be Torah scholars. Marzutra Amar Utrei Minayin Rabbana. 2 of them have to be Talmidei Chacham. Shenemar Uvamoshe of Skeinim Yalaluhu. In some way, it has to be an assembly of the elders. And Skeinim is plural. So the minimum plural is 2. Once you have 2, you fulfill Zakanim. Masker Ravashi Ema Kula Rabbanan. Maybe all 10 have to be Talmidei Chacham. So Miksiv Bakahal Zakanim. So if it would have said Kahal Zakanim or Eda Zakanim, so then you'd need 10 Talmidei Chacham. It only said Bakahal Am. Ksiv. The Am includes people that are not Talmidei Chacham. Ema Be'asar Shar Amo Trei Rabbanon. So fine. Maybe you need 10 from the regular people and then 2 kasha. So the Gemara concludes with the concession that there is no resolution to the challenge raised. And the poskim debate how the halacha is impacted by this challenge. The Tur cites some Rishonim who accept the opinion of Marzutra and require an assemblage of 10 for the bracha, and 2 of the 10 have to be Talmidei Chachamim. No, others reject Marzutra and say an additional 2 scholars beyond the group of 10. The Tur also rules that one who recites a gomel without a minyan at all has still fulfilled the obligation. Kosav Rav Alphus, the Rif. Tzorech lo ydu ba'an pe asar. You have to give thanks in front of 10. V'kach kosav Rambam. So wrote the Rambam. Aval atosvos kosav kiven de lo av shetei avdin l'churma be'inin tarvayu. The Gemara didn't resolve the question. So Tosfos says, not just 10, you need 10 plus 2. However, says the Tur, if you made the bracha in front of 8 or less than 10, you don't have to repeat it. When the Gemara said you have to do it in front of 10, that's lechatchila. But b'diavad, if you didn't do it in front of 10, you're yotzei. Now, how do we paskin? Shulchan Aruch rules with the Rambam. According to him, the bracha should be recited in the presence of 10, not 10 plus 2, 10 of whom 2 are scholars. He also records the custom to recite the bracha in the synagogue during Kriyas HaTorah when a minyan is present. He notes that there's a disagreement regarding the status of Agomel recited without 10 people. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Tzarech levarach bracha zu b'fnei asara. Utreminai Rabbana, to have to be rabbis. Ichtiv v'yiramu b'kalam. Raise him in a nation of people. Uv'moshav zakenim ya'aluhu. V'lo shchichi Rabbana, if we don't have rabbis. V'lo yanich milavarech. He should not make the bracha. However, nogu levarach achar kriyas haTorah. The general minig is to do it after Kriyas HaTorah, because you can't do Kriyas HaTorah without a minyan. So at least you have a minyan. So the Shulchan Aruch cites a dispute that if you did it without 10, it's a machlokas whether you were yotzev. Below Askor Shem Malchus, you should repeat it without saying the name of Hashem. Baruch HaGomel L'Chayavim Tov, it's without Baruch Ato Hashem. The Shulchan Aruch leaves a number of questions unanswered. Is the one reciting the bracha included in the 10? And who is considered a Talmid Chacham for the purposes of Birchas HaGomel? What is the conclusion regarding reciting Agomel without 10 people? The Mishnah Berurah addresses these issues as well as others. On his comment on Reish Yud Tes, says the Mishnah Berurah, B'fnei Asara im balanes. So he says right away, 9 plus him. He can be part of the 10. Uv'moshav zakenim, vein zaken al misha kana chacham. So a zaken doesn't mean somebody who's old in years. It means somebody who has acquired wisdom. The cause of Magen Avram de Be'inin Hani de Tanu Halacha. You have to have somebody who has studied halacha. And then there was a machlokes. If the bracha was recited less than 10, are you yotze or not? The chol ikar asara eno el mitzvah. He says, having the 10 is a mitzvah lachatchila. Ulefizem yodea shalo yizdanu lo asara. If we know that 10 people are not going to show up, yivarach below asara. Afil lachatchila. He can make the bracha without 10. Ayin ba'alachas hara'ah. Shekasav the yamtin ad shloishim yom. You should wait 30 days after the miracle happened. Pen yizdabin lo asara. Let's say you live in a town, they didn't have 10 people. And then every so often, they knew people would show up to the town, they would have a minyan. So you should wait at least 30 days. But if 30 days are going to go by and you haven't said the bracha, you should say the bracha even less than 10 men. Because you chalakayim mitzvah kilchasav yoser lo yot, but you shouldn't wait more than 30. And if the 10 didn't show, you should make the bracha in front of less than 10. And you should do it without the Shem Hashem. Mishum v'sabik brachas lahakil.
It seems clear, however, that while he can do it not in the presence of 10. It does require other people. He can't say it just by himself. I mean, that's what it seems to be.
Yes, but then you don't say it b'shem u'malchus if it's less than 10. Similar to benching, you need zimun 10 to say Hashem Elokeinu. That the name of Hashem publicly needs 10.
Right,
What
but
I
in
would-
benching, you can recite it privately. They seem to be saying here that in any case, it's not private. You have to have at least some people to say it.
Yes, I agree. Yes, because there's the concept of it's like persume nisa. You have to spread the nays. There's a public aspect to it. What I was going to add is, can women serve as the 10? I will bring up the Ratzka Tzvi Reisman. It's coming up this next couple of weeks. Parsha Zochor. There was a minig in Young Israel Hancock Park to call a Kriyas Torah prior to Mincha, Shabbos afternoon, for the women who are at home watching their children. Reading Parsha Zochor is a deraisa, according to most opinions. Many could make it in the morning, so they would make a minyan in the afternoon. Then the question came up, do you need another 10 men there when the Balkorah lanes it? And Tzvika wanted to advance the notion that perhaps it there, because remember, the concept of saying Kaddish or Kedusha, so that requires Eda, we learned from the Meraglim. But that's a davar shabigdusha, like Kaddish, Kedusha, Baruch. By the Parsha Zochor, it's not a davar shabigdusha. It's a public, it's like a persume nisa. And a raya is brought that if someone has insulted somebody, and that person, and you have to ask mechila, and the person dies, the din is you have to go to his kever, and you have to bring 10 people, and you have to publicly ask mechila at the kever. And the poskim bring that those 10, they could be women too. It's not a davar, it's a rabbim. And women apply for rabbim. So I'm wondering, because it said here, it has to be in front of rabbim. Now, here it talked about two chachamim have to be part of it. So there you could say a raya, maybe you can't have any women. But I don't know, because there's a difference between having a tzibur for davar shebekdusha and having a rabbim for public affirmation of something.
But also, nobody explains why. I guess other than the Gemara says it, there's no logical reason why you need two chachamim. I mean, nobody's articulated it.
No, it's a pasuk, because the pasuk said, "B'moishav zakenim yahalaluhu." So zakenim is the least amount of plural was two. The kahal am, because the pasuk is v'yirabamu b'kalam, u'v'moishav zakenim yahalaluhu.
Yeah.
But that was there was Avamina 10 plus 2, versus the 2 should be part of the 10. It's a ha'ara. I don't have an answer. I was just to get people to think. So, with regard to this issue, like Yaakov brought up about the presence of two Tamei Chachamim, Rav Ben Sia Abba Shol recommends reciting the bracha in a base medrash where Torah scholars are present. Nirish ha'adif levarch lebeis hamedrash. Af im ein sham sefer Torah. Ach yesh sham shnei tamei chachamim. Me'asher beis hakneses b'kriyas Torah k'shein sham tamei chachamim. You might go into a shul and there's no tamei chachamim. Kiven sh'lechatchila be'inan tamei chachamim. We saw very clearly that the lechatchila dika mitzvah is to have two tamei chachamim there. Uvuvad shlo yigar mal yedei zipitul beis hamedrash, as long as it's not going to waste time in the yeshiva. Okay,
And
let's stop here. Let's stop here.
Do we hold that one of the Talmidei Chachamim can be the one who's benching Gomel? Or do you have to have two separate Talmidei Chachamim?
Well, he said The Bifnei Asora is in Balanes. Right, that the
That's right.
Balanes could be part of that. So I would extend, why wouldn't we extend it to that as well? Because we hold it's not 10 plus 2. We hold 10 plus within the 10, the 2 should be. Why shouldn't it be? I think from the sources we've had, it would be yes. So let's stop here. What about COVID? What's the time frame? What about Birchas HaGomel for women and Ketanim? And if you just answer Amen, is that enough? That's next week. And next week, we will also start, God willing, Birchas Shechianu. Okay. Any questions, comments? How are those?